The Williams family had always seemed like the perfect portrait of happiness. Jack and Linda Williams, married for over 10 years, were the kind of couple everyone admired. Jack, a successful entrepreneur, had built a thriving construction business from the ground up. They lived in a beautiful suburban home, drove luxurious cars, and their 2 children, Emily and Max, attended the best private schools. Life was as good as it could get, or so it seemed. Linda, a graceful and loving mother, had devoted herself to raising their children while Jack provided financially for the family. She never had to worry about bills or the future because Jack was always one step ahead, constantly expanding his business and investing in lucrative projects. But beneath the surface, something was festering. A looming disaster that no one, least of all Linda, could have predicted. It started subtly, with Jack coming home later than usual, his face strained and his mood uncharacteristically dark. Linda would ask if something was wrong, but Jack always brushed it off, saying work was just a little stressful, and there were a few challenges he was dealing with. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? Jack had always been a rock steady and reliable. However, the signs became harder to ignore when the phone calls started. Linda would overhear Jack in his office, his voice low and tense. Sometimes he'd yell, slamming the phone down, only to sit in silence for hours afterward. One night, unable to hold back her concern any longer, Linda confronted him. "Jack, what's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks now. I know something's wrong. Please talk to me," she pleaded, her eyes searching his face for answers. Jack hesitated, looking at his wife with a mixture of guilt and fear. He knew he couldn't hide the truth any longer. "Linda," he began, his voice hoarse, "I'm in trouble. The business. It's not doing as well as I let on. We've lost a lot of money in the last few months, and one of our biggest projects just fell through. I'm on the verge of bankruptcy." The words hit Linda like a punch to the gut. She felt the ground shift beneath her as the life she had known began to crumble. "Bankruptcy?" she repeated in disbelief. "How did this happen? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jack hung his head in shame. "I thought I could fix it. I didn't want you to worry, but it's worse than I expected. The creditors, they're closing in. If I don't come up with the money soon, we could lose everything. Everything. The house, their cars, their children's education. The entire life they had built together was suddenly at risk." Linda's heart raced as panic set in, but she quickly swallowed it down. This was no time to fall apart. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Jack looked at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, but it was quickly dashed by reality. "I don't know. I've tried everything. I've sold assets, cut expenses, but it's not enough. We're drowning in debt." In that moment, Linda made a decision. She wasn't going to sit by and watch their family's life be torn apart. Jack had always been the provider, but now it was her turn to step up. "I'll help," she said firmly. "I'll get a job. We'll pay off the debts together." Jack's eyes widened in surprise. "Linda, no. You haven't worked in years. You don't need to do this." But Linda was resolute. "I do need to do this. For us. For the kids. I'm not going to let our family fall apart." She knew it wouldn't be easy, but there was no other option. The next morning, Linda started looking for work. It wasn't long before she landed a job as a secretary at a local law firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. She threw herself into the role, determined to make a difference. Every paycheck went toward their growing mountain of debt. It was exhausting, balancing her new job with raising 2 children and managing the household. But Linda never complained. She was doing this for her family. Weeks turned into months and the strain began to show. Jack, overwhelmed by his failing business, sank into a deep depression. He spent his days trying to salvage what little remained of his company, and his nights brooding over the financial disaster that had consumed their lives. Linda, meanwhile, juggled her secretarial duties with the mounting pressures at home. The love and laughter that had once filled their home were replaced by tension and late-night arguments. One evening, as Linda was coming home from work, exhausted and emotionally drained, she found Jack sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a stack of unpaid bills. His face was gaunt and his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had been defeated by life. Linda sat down beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We're going to get through this," she whispered, though deep down, she wasn't sure if she still believed it. Jack looked at her, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Linda. I failed you. I failed the kids. We're losing everything." Tears welled up in Linda's eyes, but she fought them back. "No, Jack. We're not losing everything. We still have each other. And as long as we're together, we can get through anything." But even as she spoke the words, she knew things were unraveling faster than she could keep up with. The debts were growing, and despite her best efforts, their financial situation continued to deteriorate. Jack's business was beyond saving, and the creditors were closing in. One night, after another brutal argument over money, Jack finally broke down. "I can't do this anymore," he confessed, his voice cracking. "I don't know how to fix this, Linda. I don't know how to save us." Linda looked at him, her heart breaking for the man who had once been so strong, so full of life. But she refused to give up. She had already sacrificed so much to keep their family afloat, and she wasn't about to stop now. "Then we'll find another way," she said softly. And find another way she did. Linda began taking on extra hours at the law firm, sometimes staying late into the night to earn more money. She even started freelancing as a personal assistant on weekends, desperate to make a dent in the enormous debts hanging over their heads. But the pressure was relentless. Their once perfect life had become a never-ending struggle to survive. Jack, consumed by guilt and shame, withdrew even further, while Linda grew more and more distant, her focus solely on keeping their family from falling apart. Then one fateful day, the final blow came. Jack's company officially filed for bankruptcy, and their home, once a symbol of their success and happiness, was put up for foreclosure. The creditors had won. Linda stood in the empty living room, the walls echoing with the memories of a life that was no more. She had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, but in the end it hadn't been enough. As she turned to leave, Jack appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of sorrow and regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Linda." Linda looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "We did everything we could, Jack. We tried." And in that moment, as they stood in the ruins of their once perfect life, they realized that while they had lost everything material, they still had each other. It wasn't the ending they had hoped for, but it was a new beginning, one built on the unbreakable bond they had forged through the darkest of times. Linda and Jack Tanaka had always seemed like the perfect couple to everyone around them. They met in university, fell in love quickly, and got married not long after graduation. Jack was a kind and dependable man who worked as an architect, while Linda, ambitious and intelligent, climbed the corporate ladder at a fast-growing tech company. They had a comfortable life, a beautiful home, and a marriage that, from the outside, appeared solid. But behind the closed doors of their modern Tokyo apartment, cracks had begun to form in their seemingly perfect relationship. For months, Jack had noticed a change in Linda. She worked longer hours, frequently came home late, and seemed distant whenever they were together. She brushed off his concerns, blaming the demands of her high-pressure job and reassuring him that everything was fine. But Jack couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was wrong. They barely spoke anymore, and when they did, it was mostly about mundane topics: work, groceries, bills. The emotional intimacy they once shared had vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence that filled their home. One evening, after another lonely dinner, Jack decided to confront her. He couldn't ignore the tension any longer. "Linda, we need to talk," Jack said, his voice firm but gentle. He could see the tiredness in her eyes, but also something else, a coldness that hadn't been there before. Linda sighed, placing her phone down on the table. "What is it, Jack?" "I'm exhausted. Can this wait?" "No, it can't," he replied. "Something's been going on between us for months now. You're distant, distracted. It feels like you're not even here anymore. I need to know what's happening." Linda's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing slightly. For a moment, Jack thought she might deny it again, give him the same excuses she always had. But then something changed. She looked away, her shoulders tense. "There's nothing going on, Jack," she said quietly. "It's just work. I've been under a lot of stress." Jack shook his head, frustration bubbling up inside him. "It's not just work, and we both know it. You're hiding something. I can feel it. Please just tell me the truth." Silence hung between them for what felt like an eternity. Linda's hands fidgeted in her lap, and Jack's heart sank as he realized she wasn't going to give him a straight answer. But then her voice, barely above a whisper, shattered the silence. "There's someone else." The words hit Jack like a physical blow, knocking the air out of his lungs. His worst fear had been confirmed. He stared at her, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what she had just said. "Who?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost afraid to hear the answer. Linda hesitated before meeting his gaze. "Hiroshi Sakamoto, my boss." Jack felt like the ground had fallen out from under him. Hiroshi Sakamoto, the charismatic CEO of the company where Linda worked, was a man Jack had met several times at corporate events. He had always admired Hiroshi's success and the way he led his company with confidence and charm. Never in a million years had Jack imagined that his wife could have feelings for him. "How long?" Jack managed to ask, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Linda's face softened, but there was no remorse in her eyes, only a tired acceptance. "It's been a few months, but nothing physical has happened. I swear, just feelings. I fell in love with him, Jack. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." Jack stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. He paced the room, his mind racing as he tried to process everything. His wife had fallen in love with another man, and not just any man. Her boss, a powerful figure who could easily ruin their lives with just a few decisions. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was Linda's calmness, her lack of guilt or sorrow for what she had done. "And what now?" Jack asked, his voice hardening. "Are you planning to leave me for him?" Linda shook her head, her tone eerily calm. "No, I never said that. But things between us have changed, Jack. I'm not the same person I was when we got married. I want more from my life, from my career. I'm being considered for a management position, and if I get it, I'll be working directly with Hiroshi every day." The pieces began to fall into place in Jack's mind. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about power, ambition, and control. Linda had fallen in love not only with Hiroshi but with the idea of the life he represented. She had chosen her career, her future, over their marriage. Jack felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He had always known that Linda was ambitious, but he had never imagined she would sacrifice their relationship for her career. The realization hit him with brutal clarity. She didn't need him anymore. "I can't do this," Jack said, his voice breaking. "I can't be with someone who doesn't love me. Someone who's already in love with someone else." Linda's eyes flashed with something. Anger, perhaps, or frustration. "Jack, you don't understand. This isn't about you. It's about me. I've worked too hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to throw it all away because of feelings. You'll find someone else, someone who makes you happy. I'm not that person anymore." The words stung more than anything else she had said. Jack stood there, numb, as the reality of what was happening sank in. His marriage was over. Linda had made her choice, and it wasn't him. "I want a divorce," Jack said finally, the words heavy in the air. Linda didn't argue. She didn't cry or beg him to stay. She simply nodded, as if she had been expecting this all along. "If that's what you want." Jack packed his things that night, unable to stay in the apartment that had once been filled with love and laughter. He returned to his childhood home in the countryside, seeking solace in the quiet and simplicity of life away from the city. He spent his days helping his aging parents, tending to the family farm, and trying to piece his broken heart back together. Meanwhile, Linda's career flourished. True to her word, she was promoted to a managerial position. Working closely with Hiroshi Sakamoto, she thrived in her new role, gaining the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of the board of directors. The rumors about her relationship with Hiroshi never quite went away, but Linda paid them no mind. She had what she wanted: power, success, and a future that stretched out before her like a glittering path of endless possibilities. But life has a way of catching up with even the most ambitious plans. Months after their divorce was finalized, Linda's world began to unravel in ways she hadn't anticipated. She discovered that Hiroshi was not the man she thought he was. Behind the charm and the business acumen, he harbored dark secrets. Secrets that could destroy both his career and hers if they ever came to light. It started with whispers in the office, rumors of financial misconduct and shady dealings that Hiroshi had kept hidden from everyone, including Linda. As a senior manager, Linda was now closely involved in the company's operations, and it wasn't long before she stumbled across documents that confirmed her worst fears. Hiroshi had been embezzling funds from the company for years, funneling money into offshore accounts and covering it up with falsified reports. If the truth got out, the entire company would collapse, and Linda would be dragged down with it. Panicked, Linda confronted Hiroshi one night after work. "I know what you've been doing," she said, her voice shaking. "The money, the fake accounts, everything." Hiroshi's calm demeanor shattered in an instant. He glared at her, his face twisting into something unrecognizable. "You should have stayed out of it, Linda," he hissed. "Now you've put yourself in danger." Linda's blood ran cold. She had never seen this side of him before, and it terrified her. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Hiroshi spat. "You're part of it now. If I go down, you're going down with me." Linda felt the walls closing in. She had sacrificed everything, her marriage, her happiness, for a man who had deceived her from the beginning. And now she was trapped in a web of lies and corruption that she couldn't escape. Desperate, Linda reached out to the one person she had thought she'd never need again: Jack. She called him, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. To her surprise, Jack agreed to meet with her. When they sat down together, Linda realized how much she had hurt him, how much she had lost by choosing ambition over love. But Jack, ever kind and forgiving, listened without judgment. "I don't know what to do," Linda confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I had everything figured out, but now I don't know if I'll survive this." Jack sighed, looking at the woman he had once loved with a mixture of sadness and sympathy. "You made your choices, Linda," he said softly, "but you don't have to face this alone." Together, they formulated a plan to expose Hiroshi's crimes. Jack used his connections in the legal world to help Linda build a case against Hiroshi, and within weeks, the scandal broke wide open. Hiroshi was arrested, and the company narrowly avoided collapse. Linda kept her position as manager, but her reputation was tarnished. The ambitious, driven woman who had once seemed unstoppable now carried the weight of her mistakes wherever she went. As for Jack, he returned to his quiet life in the countryside, content to leave the chaos of the city behind. In the end, both Linda and Jack learned that success, love, and happiness are never as simple as they seem.